What's up, Kent?
Mr. West, how are you, sir?
Doing very good. Are you excited to be here?
Man, I am excited. It's been a few days since I've been on any microphone at First Baptist Church, so I'm happy to be here with you today. Thanks for inviting me.
Yep, you did used to do announcements.
It's been a few days.
Yep. Did you get fired from announcements, or did you just...
That's an interesting topic. I don't really know what happened. I just know that around Christmas of however long ago it was, Jerry said, we're going to start using some video we already have, and next thing you know, I wasn't doing announcements.
Well, here's what I say we do. This December, me and you, we do a little announcement collaboration. Give the people what they want, you know?
I only have one request. If we do that, we got to have Robert Ramsey come back on the piano.
Okay.
Perfect. I'm in.
All right, so we got to get serious now. We have you in here to discuss our recent trip to Kenya.
Yes, sir.
Yep. That was your first time to go to Kenya, correct?
It was not.
Oh.
My first trip was in 1999. So were you even born yet?
I was born in 95.
Barely.
I turned 30 next month. So
43 next week
well,
for me.
Some of us are in our prime and some of us are getting out of it. You know what I'm saying? But I will say probably a month or two ago, I was told that was funny. I was told that I have the freedom.
Forgot there's video.
I have the freedom to ask whoever I want to come on the podcast.
Yeah.
And I knew I was preparing to go to Kenya. And I thought, who better to ask, you know? And so I asked about 5 people. They all said no. And so then I was like, well, I guess I'll ask Kent, you know?
Hey, it's better to be asked than not thought of at all.
Hey, that's a lie. You're the first person I thought of. So you're the first person I thought about. And yes, it is because I know that you have a lot of history in Kenya. This was my first time to go. I really didn't know a whole lot about what we did there or what goes on there. And so I can, you know, as the conversation goes, I can give a little perspective just from my side of it. But like you said, you told us while we were there just a little bit of, you know, your history of being there. Now, you went in 1999, correct?
Yep. So in 99, our church had already been involved with Africa for a number of years. We had worked with the Maasai. And the Maasai is really what got me excited about going to Africa with our church. And at the time when I was old enough to go, the Maasai, we weren't working with them anymore because I think they were deemed maybe reached. And so the International Mission Board was doing something called the East Coast Crusade, and they were trying to get as many churches mobilized to go along the east coast of Africa and kind of, in some sense, finish the work down in the Mombasa area. And so we actually took 2 groups that year. I was 16, and that was 99, and we did a really blitz evangelism, and we had one group that went, and I want to think there was close to 50 in total, or maybe there was 50 in my group. But with that being said, there were 2 different groups that went out that year from our church, and it was a large number of people. And so, that was my first trip to Kenya in 99, and as part of the East Coast Crusade with the International Mission Board.
Yeah. What I could tell, you know, just from me being there and seeing, you know, even first, second day we were there doing whatever we were doing, it did feel like I was stepping into something that a lot of really godly people have already, like, they built the foundation on, and it just felt like we were just there building on the foundation that they had already. You know, a lot of people from our church that have done a lot of good things there, and we were just, you know, me and the guys that were with us were kind of, I don't want to say, yes, we were benefiting from their hard work, but it also felt like we were just adding on just a little bit on top of the very firm foundation they've already built. Would you agree on that?
Yeah, for sure. So like going back, I mean, I'm not that old. I'm about to be 43. So there's people that could speak to this a lot better than I can. But, you know, when you go back to the early 90s, our church had a couple of groups or a couple of trips that we went on. One was India and one was Kenya. Mm-hmm. And then we also were doing some work in Brazil. And so you had some leaders in our church at that time really functioning as the mission department. So you had like John Lennon doing Brazil. You had a guy named Steve Morrison, Danny Lyons, a number of other guys that were a part of the Kenya-India trip. And so that's kind of, I would say, from my understanding of our international background of a church doing international missions. That's kind of where it began. And so because of our historical strong work in Kenya and around the world, that's how we went from Mombasa to where you're talking about in 2001, which is working with the KO People Group. And so just, a little bit of history of that foundation is that in 2001, the International Mission Board approached our church about adopting a people group, and that people group was the KO. And so the idea at that time was that we would work with the KO and we'd start working down the Rift Valley or up the Rift Valley towards Uganda and meet another work with other churches that had started, and we would kind of help finish the evangelism of the Rift Valley in Kenya. With that being said, and so that's how we went from Mombasa, the Maasai, to where we are now, and what you're talking about in the KO area in E10, which is where our training center is, in 2001. And so in 2001 was a vision trip that went. I was with Danny Lyons at that point, and then I think our first group was 2002 or 2003 that we started taking groups to the area you're talking about.
Now, here's the real question. Where and how did y'all meet Hezbon? Because for those that are listening, never met Hezbon, he was the guy that drove us around all week and hung out with us all week, knows literally everybody, knows so much, such a good time, very wise, very godly man. I could hang out with him all day, every day. So how in the world did our church find him?
Yeah, so Hezbon at that time, I've known Hezbon since 2002, 2003, when he started working with us. And then 2014, actually in 2004, he lived in Kenya with my brother and Caleb Davis. Okay. And then 2014, he lived with me and Caleb as well. And so I've known him for almost 20 years now and call him my African, father. But with that being said, in 2003, he had lost his job previously that he was working at a factory around Nairobi called Riru. And with that, he started driving a tour van for the Kenya Baptist Convention. And so with that, just through working with the Kenya Baptist Convention, he was a part of our group. And because of his, just who he is as a person, likable, he just jumped right in and everyone took a liking to him. And I think even at that time, I wasn't thinking this way because I was just kind of a soldier that was going along on the missions. I wasn't a leader. I wasn't really even paying attention. I was kind of there for the adventure in a lot of ways. But everyone just really took a liking to him, and so he's been a part of our group since, ever since then. And he's worked with different tour companies and stuff. But pretty much, if we go, it's kind of we're going, and we have to have Hezbon. And so at this point, we just call him, and he organizes everything for us. When he's on the ground, he does the work of evangelism in a lot of ways. People look up to him with who we work with, and so he's an invaluable resource for us that. It'll be hard for me to think of Kenya without thinking about Hezbon.
Yeah. I would like to, whenever he does pass and he stands before the Lord and, he's able to see, I worked I drove tour bus, I did all this, the fruit that has been born from just him being who he is, you know what I'm saying?
We joke around about he and I in our conversations because we message weekly if we don't talk weekly, and we'll joke Hezbon, when you or I die, if you die, I'm definitely coming to your funeral. And I think one thing that was funny is he's like, well, how will I know if you die? And I was like, I guess you'll see it on Facebook. And he just started laughing. But there's this understanding that no matter where I am, if something happens with Hezbon, I'll be in Kenya for whatever I can do to help out. He's that kind of figure for me, and he means a lot, and our church should be very grateful for how he's contributed and how he's helped us.
So if he's your African father, maybe he can at least be like my African great uncle or something.
Sure. He'll take that. Yeah,
that's close enough. He can at least be my buddy,
and he has not made a stranger for sure.
That is true. All right, and so you mentioned that you lived there in 2014. What brought that to be?
So,
also, I graduated high school in 2014.
Yeah. So, I don't even know how old I would have been. 30.
Almost 50, probably.
Yeah. 32, 33, I guess, at that time. With our church in Kenya, you got to think that we started in this area around 2002, 2003. So we already had 10 plus years invested. There was this understanding that when our group showed up in Kenya to do evangelism, to encourage the churches, to do discipleship, the churches were full. And then when we left, it was like nothing was happening. And so it's hard to, when you adopt a people group like the IMB asked us to do at that time, we were the feet of the missionaries on the ground, but we were only going once a year, right? So, and the IMBs actually doesn't do this anymore for a lot of good reasons. But we weren't getting a full picture. And so for me personally in my life, what was happening was the company I worked for was private equity owned, had just sold. I went to a new company that was formed off of that sale. And that company was called Denali Water, which now does 700-800 million a year. But at the time when I was there, I was one of a handful of employees and there was no job security. So I just started thinking, well, if I don't have assurance of a job tomorrow, which is kind of what it felt, then I need to think, what other job, I need to be looking for a job in case this one doesn't work out. And so I thought, well, if I'm going to look for a job, then I have to consider missions because as a believer and you're called to do the work of the gospel, I was like, I need to at least consider missions. And so, again, you have the church. We've been here for a while. We don't really know what's going on. We had heard some stuff that we may need to check out. Then I have my job situation saying maybe I need to consider missions. And that just led down this path of going back to really the idea of experiencing God, which is you seek God or you figure out where God's moving and get involved. And then you, in doing that, you also, in making decisions, there's really three ways that God can confirm stuff: through his word, through prayer, and through godly counsel. And so just through all that process, the church, and Jay Ham was the missions pastor at that time. It's kind of like, hey, we think we want to send some people over to live in Kenya and figure it out for 6 months. So I was like, okay, I'm in, but I'm only going if Caleb Davis goes, who has been a friend forever. And I knew Caleb was doing nuclear plant outages, and I thought, there's no way Caleb's going to go, but, this is kind of my out. So I called Caleb up on the phone and said, hey, Caleb, here's the deal, gave him the story. I'm only going if you go. And Caleb said something that I knew I was in trouble because he goes, I'll pray about it. He didn't just say no. And so over the next couple of months, we checked in. He was finally like, all right, I'm going. And so from there, the church formally went, before the deacon body. The deacon body affirmed it. There clearly wasn't anything against scripture or prayer that was saying this was a bad idea. And then the church just affirmed that. And then we moved to Kenya for 6 months.
Very cool. Now, off topic for a second. We'll be back on topic. May have only been around Caleb Davis like 4 times in my whole life. But all 4 times, he acts like we've been best friends. My whole life.
That's Caleb Davis.
He's a good time. I feel like he would be a good time to live with in a foreign country for 6 months.
So one of the things that there's 2 things that that set Caleb apart from any others. One was in 2013, I was in my normal annual trip to Kenya. And I think I had what would be called culture shock. Like when someone lives in a foreign country for a long time, there's eventually a point where you have this idea of like, why am I here? I've ruined my life. I hate these people. Like, that's what it's called is, and so in 13, when in my mind, I was basically moving there, I was having that happen to me. And so for about 3 days, I didn't hardly sleep at all. I was crying and couldn't explain it. And Danny and Jay were like, what's going on? I was like, I don't know, I'm just crying. And they were like, take a sleeping pill and you'll be better. And I took a sleeping pill and woke up fine. But I had this anxiety and stuff that didn't hit me until we were on the plane from Dallas and Caleb knew that this had happened before, but we were on the plane to London, and I was like, Caleb, I can feel this happening. He just looks at me and he says, if we need to turn around, we hadn't even made it across the ocean. He's like, if we need to turn around right now, it's okay, we'll go home. And so like, that's the kind of person that he is. And that was very meaningful, to me. And then Caleb is a good time where like he's pretty unwavering and nothing affects him.
Like jumping off a cliff in croc-infested water.
And he did it, so I went after him. But another time, which could have, he would drove a lot, and he thought of it as like Frogger, dodging people, driving fast. And every time, if you've been to Kenya, there's speed bumps, animals, I'd always be like, oh, I'd make all these noises. And one day we pulled up, and he just put it in park, and this is after a long day, and he looks over and he says, Kent, for the betterment of our friendship, I'm gonna need you to drive from now on. And that was his way of just like, I need you to be quiet. But he didn't get mad about it. And so I drove for about 2 days, and I hated it. And I was like, all right, dude, you can drive again. But that's just, that's the kind of guy he is. And, awesome. He's the eternal optimist. If we're tied up and someone literally has a gun to our head and you can see the bullet and they're about to pull a trigger, he'd look over and say, we're going to get out of this somehow. Like, that's just how he is. So our personalities worked really good together, and we had a great time, and that's part of the reason why I said I wouldn't go unless he did.
Yeah, very cool. So you did that in 2014, and then fast forward to now, and I think I'll be able to speak on this just from what I saw. I mean, obviously you have way deeper roots there than I do. I've been one time, so I can't sit here and talk like I know.
You're
everything.
An expert.
Yeah, no. What are we doing now? So, what has come? Just kind of close the gap in a sensible amount of time from 2014 to now.
Yeah, so there's a couple of facets to this. One, there's a group that has continued to move up the Rift Valley and do part of what was the initial
like the evangelism thing.
Yep, which was the initial vision from 2001. There's a group that's continued to do that, and they're doing what you would think would happen, which is they're going to do evangelism. They're trying to start churches. They're strengthening leaders, but they're moving as they do this, and then hopefully those established churches are coming back and doing the follow-up and discipleship. So in 2014, I was kind of tasked with the school, the training center in E10.
Okay. And that's where we were at this past.
Yep. And that and the association churches with that. So what I've tried to focus on since then is making sure that we're being good stewards of what we are, of the money that God gives us that we're utilizing in Kenya. So I want to make sure that the stuff that's going towards the school is being used what it's supposed to be for, that we do have students, and those students are the students that need to be there, that they're going to strengthen the churches, that are going to encourage believers. And then what we're doing is we try to do conferences to, again, strengthen and encourage the church. A lot of discipleship type stuff, and just, trying to make that strong to where ultimately the school can be self-sustaining. Yeah. And then when the school's self-sustaining, that's going to allow the Kenyans to have full ownership of that. And we can definitely still come along and do some conferences and encouragement. But at the same time, that school is designed to train leaders that will go and strengthen the churches that are around there. Yeah. And so we have students that come from a lot of different areas. But that's been my main focus. And the groups that we go is to really do teaching, discipleship, and training for those that association, but also at the school.
Yeah. Okay. So from what I saw at our time, they're training these pastors and leaders at the school there in E10. Number one, there's a guy that's over it named Mark. How long has he been connected with y'all?
So Mark got saved probably, I think it was my dad that may have led him to the Lord, or maybe Rick Harrell. I can't remember which, but 2003 or 2004, and he has a church down in the valley a little bit called Chebugoit, and he, maybe it was Bruce Brown, but regardless, he got led to the Lord by somebody in our group. Sure. He's a strong church leader. He has a church of probably 40 or 50 regular members. And that don't count kids usually, so it's probably a little higher than that. And he's been a part of the association, and just recently he became the principal in February of this year.
So from what I saw from him is like he is like obviously way better than I do, but this is just from my first time observing, is he's about it. Like he wants to see this thing go, wants to see young guys get trained, wants to see all these different things, and he's fully about it. And he's a good time too. Like, I just enjoyed talking with him. And it sounds like he's getting some kind of degree from Southeastern Seminary or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah, he's going to Uganda, and there's a seminary there that's attached to Southeastern University.
That's right. Yeah. Yep. Okay. So there's Mark. And then also what I saw too is, yes, there was some guys there, the way y'all talk to them, that are older, and I don't want to say old, but just like older that y'all have known for a while. Like Chief was there, like all these different people. But in that group as well, there was 3, 4, 5 guys probably early 30s and younger, that was really refreshing to see. Are those guys newer to the group, or have they also always just been there?
No, they're not. So Elijah, Robert, and then
Ellie was a guy named Ellie was one of them.
Ellie,
He's
okay.
the 23-year-old. Yeah.
Yeah, so those are fairly new. So Elijah, I believe, was a student in our school, decided that he was called to be a pastor. He moved to Moy Bend, not his home, and actually continued the church that was there, and he's living amongst the Moy Bend people, and he's being a pastor. And so that's really exciting to see.
Explain why that's different there. I didn't understand this, but you explain to the people listening.
Culturally, they've always, the model for them has been a mother church model. So you have the AIC, which is actually started by Baptist missionaries. It's the African Inland Church. They started that, and they do have a mother church model that then has satellites. You have the Catholic churches that do that, so you're definitely going to have a hierarchy. You have Assembly of God's there. You have a number of them, and so us as Baptists, we come in and say every church is autonomous, and you're loosely associated or directly associated with an association, but there is no head person per se because every church is autonomous.
Yeah,
and so that's. There's some things that we do here that looks like the American church that we're okay that they don't necessarily do that in Africa because we want to call them the Jesus, not to look like First Baptist Church Russellville.
Oh yeah.
And so that's been a hard thing to figure out is when you have our Baptist model that we do here in America, and then their model is a mother church that then has churches under that makes a pastor want to be like a traveling pastor. So maybe they're in their church one Sunday a month, but then I need to go preach somewhere else.
At these satellite places.
Raises their status, other stuff. So there's some cultural stuff to overcome. And so for Elijah to say, I'm going to move to Moy Bend, I'm going to stay there, I am going to be the main pastor, that would be what we would rather see in someone that's shepherding their flock than someone who says, I'm going to travel around and have a church, but I'm also going to go visit these other churches regularly.
And what I'll say because me and Rick Moss on that Sunday, me and him went to Elijah's church there in Moy Bend with Hesbon, and it was like vibrant, and he was getting after it. Elijah was getting after it. And but like tons of kids were there. There was 15, 20 adults there. I mean, it was you could tell that not only was he fully invested there, but there was a group of people that called themselves like genuinely like, this is our church, like we are here together. And I think it's something to be said when a guy will fully invest himself somewhere, pastor those people, but not only just pastor those people, but like be with the people.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And so
you definitely have to and I've had some ebb and flows of what I think we need to hold true to, and some of those are cultural stuff that we do here. And then there's definitely things that are biblical that make us Baptists that we say this is our understanding of Scripture and theology, and we're going to be unwavering. But then there's some things that like even a mother church, we don't use that term with our churches, so I don't want to confuse anyone, but there's something to be said that if this model is what works for Kenya, that you have a one church that is kind of, we'll use a home church, so that sounds better than mother church, but one church that is kind of your sending church out to the satellites and supports them, that may not be our model, but at the same time, we can hold the line on theology and hold the line on what makes us Baptists and say, there's some things when it's related to the church we may do a little bit different because their culture is different, and we're okay with that, and we're not calling them to be our culture, we're calling them to follow Jesus. And so there's some stuff that we can be okay with. Another one is women deacons. So like there's, we don't do that here, and we can, there can be plenty of discussion about what Scripture says about that. But in Kenya, for the most part, we don't go in saying you can't have women deacons. Why? Because it's kind of everywhere, and Africa for one. So is that something that I want to hammer in Kenya, when the reality is we hold that line and we believe that, and that's the way it needs to be. But I'm not going to die on that hill in Kenya because their culture is different, and it's okay. So there's some stuff like that are hard for us to figure out because culture. But that's also part of the reason when we go, or when I go, I've tried to understand culture, ask questions, and figure out what is culturally okay, and that we can let it slide a little bit. Versus, no, this is a deep theological issue of believing in Jesus and died on the cross and assurance of salvation and stuff like that. So, like that's another example. Assurance of salvation. We hammer assurance of salvation because they have a culture that teaches you health and wealth, that teaches a lot of other things, and that's one that we are going to hold the line on and say, no, Scripture is very clear on assurance of salvation, and here's why it is. And so we'll speak to that one and be very direct.
Very good. Here's a good question to ask. Obviously, I got to go this time with you and with 5 of the guys, and we spent 4 days, and we stood in front of these people, that pastors of churches there and leaders of these churches there, and taught them like biblical things. We taught how to teach the Bible, how the Bible is one story. We taught them the biblical view of leadership and the biblical view of stewardship. And some of the things that we were teaching, I just assumed that were like, they'd be like, oh yeah, we do. Oh yeah. Dude, they were eating it up the whole time. And in that group, I was the only one that technically gets paid to teach the Bible. Yeah. Everybody else, Luke owns his own insurance company. Chris Goodman's a captain of the state trooper. Rick Mosk is something at ConAgra. He provided a lot of good snacks. But
thanks, Rick.
So it's like all these guys were able to stand up and just teach biblical truth. And so from what I saw there is that it seems like anybody in our church that loves the Lord with all their heart, mind, soul, and strength, desires to make disciples and see like actual fruit bore all around the world, could step foot in Kenya and make a immediate impact. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, I am not I don't make the decisions or the direction for First Baptist Church missions. Sure. But what I can say for me is in 1999. When I went to Mombasa, I was going for lions and tigers and bears. Now, we know there's no tigers and bears, but I mean, it's the idea of the adventure. It was the idea of like Africa. We watched Ghost in the Darkness before we went. Like, if you haven't seen the movie, it's phenomenal. But like, I was going for the adventure of it, and thankfully, God also got a hold of me with the gospel in the sense of a heart for the people and keep going back. And now we are 26 years later, and that many trips probably since, and lived there for a brief time. And so when I think about Kenya, it's a great place that you can still take a large group of people, men or women. So we'd love to, if you want to go with me and teach in the fall and you're a woman, like by all means come with us. But it's a great place to go for the gospel that's fairly safe in the sense of just the world and how dangerous it is. It does take a while to travel there, but when you make disciples, you're teaching people what you know. Mm-hmm. You're not teaching people things that you don't know. And so I think that it's definitely one that anybody can feel free to be a part of, man, woman, young, old, and hopefully you catch the gospel, and then maybe you do go somewhere else like the Middle East or Southeast Asia or some other place where the gospel is less well known.
Sure. And with that, I will say, every time I've been on a mission trip with our church, whether it's San Diego, Wyoming, Kenya, Guinea, wherever, all these different places, you always go with a group of people, and you always have those moments at night when you're eating dinner and you're just hanging out and it's some downtime. And what I have noticed every time, so everybody has their main friends at church that they're always around, right? And on Sundays, right? But then you go on these trips with people that you may never see. For example, Rick Mosk is not in the Young Adult and Families Ministry, so I don't see him in one of the 4 life groups that we have or any of the other things we got going on, because Rick is just above the age bracket. Just above it, okay? Just above it, not too far. But I got to sit down and have dinner with him every night, and we got into really great conversations and got to know. And so what I see every time I go on these trips is that it creates deeper and more meaningful relationships with people that are part of this church. You know what I'm saying? And so that's part of my plug for why people should go on these trips. Yes, is it about the work of the gospel ministry? Absolutely. Okay, don't misinterpret me there, but one of the major benefits of going on one of these trips is you get to be a part of the work of the ministry with people that are actually a part of your church, that just because the nature and size of our church and the way things go around here, you may not see every week. You know what I'm saying? And so it creates real opportunities to make some lasting relationships with people that are outside of your age and stage of life. And I mean, the things that I learned from Chris Goodman talking about his early days of being a father and also getting into being a state trooper, like the challenges that he faced, it's like, man, dude, I got way more respect for you now. I mean, I respected you before, but my good, you just have these moments, and I feel like people that are always like, oh, I don't really want to go out, I only get so many weeks of vacation here, or this, that, and other, man, you're really missing out on an opportunity to create some serious relationships, not only be a part of the work of the ministry, but then also just actually know some people that you go to church with every Sunday that you just have no relationship with,
Yeah. I mean, Sunday mornings are extremely important here at First Baptist Church.
Goodness,
but
yeah.
where Sunday mornings meaning large worship service. But if you really want to get plugged in with First Baptist, you do that by life group. You do that going on mission. You do that by serving on Wednesday nights. Those are where you're going to build community, and that's where you're going to build relationships and those long-lasting things that actually help you sustain your church membership here, and not just showing up on a Sunday in large worship service. So, that's where you are going to get a better understanding of who God is.
I'd agree with that. That's a good statement. It is the truest thing. The grass is always the greenest where you water it. So if you want something out of life, you can't just sit around and hope it happens. You have to actually do something about it. So, but I will say the best part of our time in Kenya was at night when we were eating dinner, and instead of watching soccer like you wanted to, we watched WWE. You know what I'm saying? Had a good time.
I have nothing else to say related to that.
Okay. Well, Kent, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. It was a pleasure.
I'm glad you came. And I feel like this was a good adult conversation. Would you agree?
Please cut that out.
All right.
I saw the plane picture got me dying laughing a minute ago. Someone held up the plane, and I could see it in the. Oh. We hope you leave with a better understanding of who God is.